is. So this trust is created. It's given a name so they can identify the trust. And if you read into trust law, you'll start to find out all sorts of interesting things like the beneficiary. The grantor and the beneficiary of a trust are supposed to be private. They're supposed to remain hidden. They're not supposed to be seen for their protection. So that now you got this trust that's been created by the government. They're supposed to be holding all your equity and trust and your rights, and everything goes along with you being born. And then they never hear from you ever again. But they do send you a birth certificate in the mail. And this birth certificate, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. I mean, even 2 years ago, I don't think I was fully accurate with exactly what it was, which just turns out to, and I'm not going to, boy, this is always a tough one. I don't like to say for an absolute fact on anything. But you're sent back basically a receipt, no different than you would get if you went to a bank and you deposited a check for $5,000 and they give you a deposit receipt. It means that there is a security somewhere. There's value somewhere. This is the receipt for what you deposited. Now, the problem with all this is that they actually used to tell you, and actually it's still in the Vital Statistics Act, that a birth certificate is not personal identification. Don't use it as personal identification. And the reason is because if you research into law, you'll find out that if whatever you use as personal ID, you've assumed all liability that goes along with that identification. That birth certificate, if it is a receipt of a security somewhere, of an obligation somewhere, then if you use it as ID, you've assumed all the obligations that go along with that, which means you've actually just appointed yourself as the security or the surety or the trustee in the matter. I keep telling people in the videos the government has tricked you into being the trustee of your own trust. And that's exactly what's going on. When you're walking into a statutory courtroom, this seems like nonsense right now until you start to research it, but you'll find out that every person in that courtroom is representing the legal person. Your legal person. You own it. You aren't it. You own all the value in it, all the equity. And everybody in that courtroom is supposed to be there to protect the beneficiary who isn't seen in the courtroom. He has no standing in provincial court. But they're getting you to show up as a trustee who disobeyed basically trust law. The laws that the government passed that said, okay, we're administrating all these estates. These are the rules and regulations that our own officers have to follow. And that's how they view you. That I got real fast there and sped things up at the very end there. But so you're going around using a receipt for a security that is not personal ID. They tell you not to use it as personal ID. And the first thing you did is you went and used it as personal ID. You went and got a social insurance number with it. You went and got a driver's license with it. You went and got all these benefits using that piece of that document that is not supposed to be used as personal ID. Well, unfortunately, there's a maxim of law that ignorance is no excuse. Right? And ignorance is no excuse. Just because you didn't know what it is, that does not absolve you of liability from using whatever it is you used. So this so the problem is our own ignorance. We got ourselves into this mess. So then now you got this trust that's been created by the government. They're supposed to be holding all your equity and trust and your rights, and everything goes along with you being born. At this point, I would recommend for most people that recording the live birth and then getting a birth certificate is the way to go. And the reason for that is when used properly, the proper role and the proper function of the government, and they will do this once you know who you are, they will protect your rights because that's their job. Again, you just got to read the first line of the Bill of Rights before the preamble. An act for the recognition and protection of human rights. Okay? They're supposed to be protecting you. The problem is we never properly came back and clarified our status with the government afterwards. They actually don't know who we are. So by operation of law, because we've gone and gotten driver's licenses, something an actual free man wouldn't even need. Only officers of their corporation need driver's licenses. So if we went and got one, then who must we be? We must be an officer of their corporation. For instance, pretend you gave $100,000 to somebody to hold in trust for you. Okay, but you and you gave it to say an organization.
I'm with you.
Now you got like say a big organization like say an investment firm that's got 10,000 people working for it, and you've just invested let's say $1 million with them. And then you decide, you know what, I'd like to go cash in on that $1 million, or I want my dividends for the year. So you're going to go and you're going to show up at one of their offices somewhere, and you're going to say, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I'd like to take my money out. Do they not have a duty and obligation to verify that you actually are who you say you are? Before giving away $1 million they're supposed to be holding in trust for somebody? Yeah, and plus, you got to remember, too, with an organization like them, they only work off of what they can see. And what they can see is something that's a matter of public record, right?
Exactly.
They can only see something that's a matter of public record. So if you haven't corrected your status or made it a matter of public record, does it matter how many times you show up somewhere and claim to be something?
So I think you're getting into here the aspect of notices. Is that correct?
Absolutely, but also doing correct notices. Just sending a letter off to somebody. People want to send. I've heard all sorts of interesting things over the years. I'll call them interesting about people. As soon as they find out about this, they want to start sending letters off to the Pope. Okay, so an administrator administrates a living will. It carries out a living will, and an executor executes a written will. And this goes right back to, again, ancient Egypt. So it is written, so it shall be done. That's the Hammurabi Code. If there's a written will to be executed, that's what an executor executes, the one who's been appointed as an executor. And executors are paid, by the way. That's a paid position. You can't ask somebody to be your executor without compensating them. Administrators, same thing. That means administrators just administrate something. It means there's a living will, like a corporation. Every time there's a board of directors meeting and they come up with a new will for the corporation, well, the corporation is going to start doing this now. Is that not a living will? And then they administrate it because they're all directors of a corporation. When we talk about not wanting to be seen or viewed as an agent or officer of the crown, right? We spoke about that. You don't want to be a trustee. You don't want to be an agent or an officer of the crown, because agents and officers of the crown don't have human rights. They have to obey statutes. It all comes back to status, too. Who are you to be doing that? Right? That's one of the most overlooked aspects of this, is people don't understand that it now comes down to who are you, because certain people have no right to do that. For instance, agents of the crown, trustees. Certain people have no right to be accessing certain systems, because if you're a trustee, you can't access something that's supposed to be for the beneficiary. You got to make sure that your status is recognized correctly. The record's been changed. You have to have standing. Without standing, you have nothing. Nothing. They don't even have to listen to you. You are like a guy that shows up at a boardroom meeting for a corporation who owns no shares in the company, who's mouthing off or trying to bring in corporate procedures in a corporation you have no standing in. They don't recognize you. You have no standing. It's beneficial because we've got this apparatus in place, a system, a government, that if you know who you are and you've done everything right, it's there to actually protect your rights. It's there to protect anything that you own. It's there to protect your property. They're there for your protection. There's nothing wrong with the proper courts. They will hear the terms of the contract. That's the law between the parties. You don't want to say you're not the name. They know you're not the name. You ever notice how they always ask you when they want you to specify? They would say, like, are you an agent for the name? Are you an agent? Are you an agent?
What would be my correct response then?
You sure as hell don't want to be an agent of the name. Agents assume liability. When you use the birth certificate as personal ID, you're claiming to be an agent for the name, and agents are liable. Representative is fine if you want to correct your status. Again, the problem is you're now walking into statutory court, which doesn't recognize human rights. There's no such thing, because statutes are all basically corporate policies. They're accusing you of having been an agent of the crown, and I'm guessing, though, even though you didn't produce your driver's license, they've probably got a driver's license number on the ticket, right? What you can do is just write refused for cause on it and send it right back to the courthouse, if you know what that means. Again, that's the thing. I mean, I could give you any number of solutions, but you have to actually know what they mean to defend what I'm saying. And refused for cause means that there is no injured party. There's no cause of action. You're not an agent of the crown. And that's where the fabricating evidence part comes in. These cops fabricated evidence. I never gave them a driver's license number. They put that on there. I never provided that for them. Now that's fabricating evidence. I am not an agent of the crown, and if they're claiming I was at the time of the complaint, then they can produce some facts or evidence that demonstrates that I was acting as an agent of the crown bound by their statutes at that time. All the license is a license to act as an agent of the crown on the roads. That's what you're being licensed for. The Crown and Right of Her Majesty and Right of Canada. That's the Crown. It's a Crown corporation. Another thing I like to clarify with people, don't be getting mad at Queen Elizabeth. Where in any statute does it ever say Queen Elizabeth? It doesn't. It says Her Majesty. The Crown Corporation of Canada is known as Her Majesty. The minute you hear Her Majesty, people are getting pissed off at the Queen and trying to send Buckingham Palace registered mail telling her to F off. Okay, people have to stop doing stupid shit like that. Right? Again, man, people should read up on ancient Egyptian law, like the Hammurabi Code. Everything is right in there that's going on right now. It's almost like the Romans rehashed that. Okay? There's another maxim of law. Keep people asking me, where do I send this? Who do I talk to? Where do I go for this? And all I say is, where did you sign up for it? Maybe that's the first place you should go back to then, instead of contacting the Pope because of your driver's license.